New at 6, Live 5 investigates human sex trafficking right here in the Lowcountry. How often it's happening and how close to home it is.
Our Colby Satterfield shows us a hidden world many of us don't see, but so many victims live in.
It happens.
It's happening 3 doors down.
Human trafficking is something that we see.
Very complex crime.
It happens here.
It happened to me.
It happened to her. Not in some overseas country. It happened right here in South Carolina on this very street in West Ashley. This hotel is where her story as a victim of sex trafficking ended and her long road to recovery began. Even 5 years later, it's not safe for her to show her face or even give her real name, but she wants you to hear her story so the same thing doesn't happen to you or your little girl.
I was in an abusive relationship and ran to Maryland with a friend to get away from that situation. That's when I met him.
Beth thought a business trip with friends would help her escape a bad situation at home, but a chance encounter outside of her hotel room set the wheels in motion for months of misery.
And we started talking, I gave him my number, and we just texted, and I mean, he just seemed like a really nice guy. And we were supposed to go out and have drinks one night.
A lie. She would never get that drink. Instead, he told her he had to go help a friend move. Another lie, one she recognized far too late.
And where I thought we were just taking her somewhere else and then he was going to take me home, he ended up dropping me off at a hotel with her, like 3 hours from where I was staying at, and left for like a week. And I didn't see him again until he came back. He took the room phone and everything.
He made it clear she wouldn't be calling anyone and wouldn't be leaving the room anytime soon. Beth had no idea what was happening or the nightmare that was to come.
You know, after a couple days you figure it out. Because when I did see him, he took me outside to his car and we talked, and he asked if I was ready to work. And I told him I really don't think I have a choice, do I? And he just kind of laughed, and that's when he gave me like a little throwaway phone. He was like, all right, will you start today?
In that moment, she knew she would be sold.
When you're under a pimp, I mean, you have to call him daddy, of course, and that's for a reason. I mean, he's in control of everything. He chooses when you eat, when you sleep, when you shower, what calls you can and can't take. I mean, he's there 24 hours a day. When he's not there, he's there. He's got eyes on you.
The life she was living can only be described as hell.
It's really kind of a blur. You just do it. I don't know. You go numb to it. I took myself out of that reality. Like, I didn't want to believe that was my life.
Her life had become part of a business of selling women and trafficking people, a life she never knew existed.
You know, it's not something that's just in the movies like I thought it was. It's not. It's very real. It's in your face.
She was trafficked up the East Coast from D.C. to Florida to here in Charleston. Her days becoming one and the same.
It was scary. You never knew what was coming to your door. I knew we were in Florida. It was just a normal day. I'd been up for like 2 days straight. And I told him, hey, I'm taking one more call. I've got to go to sleep. I can't do it anymore. That call, he robbed me. So he wouldn't let me go to sleep. I had to get that money back.
She had no control over her own life or her own body.
The pimp, he had got me pregnant. And the only time he took me to the doctor was to make me have an abortion. That was hard. I don't believe in abortion, but it was either willingly go do the abortion or pretty much have both of our lives gone.
Do you think he would have killed you?
Oh yeah, he would have at least tried. He would have hurt me enough to hurt the baby.
What was happening to Beth is happening at this very moment to victims in our community.
But there are more slaves today in this country than there were in the 1860s, but it is modern day slavery.
South Carolina Attorney General Alan Wilson says trafficking is huge. Right now in the coastal areas and here in the Charleston area, it's flourishing.
Their lives are chaos. They live from moment to moment. There's no forward thinking. They don't think about their future. They just think about what's happening in this moment.
Sharon Riker with Doors to Freedom helps victims of trafficking and says they are targeted and selected very specifically.
So he finds out everything about her to use against her when those tables begin to turn and it becomes violent. Saying, you know, if you don't do what I say I'm asking you to do, then maybe I'll hurt a family member, or if she gets beaten.
Beth witnessed this herself time and time again. Her trafficker, she says, wasn't just smart with luring victims, but getting away with it.
They're smart. They're very smart. And he was one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. He has the mind of law officers. He knows how they think. He knows how they move. So he moves the opposite.
Detective Benton is the human trafficking investigator for the North Charleston Police Department. He works with local and federal agencies and says the majority of his cases tie to North Charleston.
It is known as being such a profitable market. We have a high number of hotels that are here.
He sees these traffickers and pimps and knows how they operate.
What I've personally dealt with, a lot of them are gang members. Gangs find trafficking very appealing, and they're starting to move towards trafficking in persons versus trafficking in drugs.
It's a global problem, and one that's only getting worse.
Human trafficking is the second largest criminal enterprise in the world, and it is a close second place to drugs and armed trafficking, and will probably overtake those within the next couple of years.
For the victims, there's often no way out.
I contemplated suicide a lot. I just wanted out of it, and I didn't know how to get out of it.
Beth says there was no chance of escape. She knows because she tried.
The night that he found me trying to leave, I didn't know what to expect. He made it clear I wasn't going anywhere. He tried to have 3 girls jump me, and when I started to fight back, he held me down, kind of put his foot over my chest so I couldn't get up, and let the girls beat me up.
It was that moment she realized she was stuck. You may think you've never seen this happen, but you probably have.
They're regular people. I've seen FBI agents have come to see me, government officials. It's everybody. It's your husband will be there every day.
It doesn't matter where you live.
Human trafficking can happen in a rural one-stop sign town. It can happen in a farm. It can happen in an industrialized area. It can happen in an urban area. It can happen in an area where there's tourism. It can happen in a residential neighborhood. If I've described any place that you live near, that is where human trafficking can happen, and it probably is happening.
It happens here. This very parking lot is where her story ended, and her life began again. Coming up tonight at 11, Beth describes how she was finally rescued. Plus, I investigate why this is happening so much in the Lowcountry and what is being done to make it stop on our 2-part series on sex trafficking in the Lowcountry.
Our series on human trafficking in the Lowcountry continues.
Our Colby Satterfield introduced us to Beth, a woman who was forced into sex trafficking.
Now tonight, Beth's story continues, and we look into what's being done to bring sex trafficking to an end.
It happens across the country, our state, and in our community. Sex trafficking. It's a crime we don't know much about until it lands on our doorstep, or in this case, a motel door. I sat down with a woman whose story brings us here to this West Ashley motel. Beth was a victim of sex trafficking. It's not safe for her to show her face or even give her real name, but her story is all too common.
We're kind of desensitized by television and music, that when we see it, we're no longer shocked by that. And so sometimes I think we're guilty of doing nothing.
Chances are you've seen sex trafficking happen right before your eyes. It's here, on our streets, in our motels, and in our neighborhoods. Beth knows because she lived it.
It's a completely different world. Like, it's not the same. It took a long time to adjust back to real life.
And was brought by her trafficker to South Carolina for one reason.
It's really popular there. Charleston and Mount Pleasant, it's huge. It's everywhere.
And adults aren't the only victims.
A lot of our kids were sexually abused when they were 6 or 7 years old, so their entire life has been chaotic. So they are in survival mode.
Sharon Reichard works with victims of sex trafficking. She says the number of people who are being trafficked and the number of children who are vulnerable brings a harsh realization.
It's devastating, and the trauma that these kids have had to go through is horrific.
She'll be opening a home for these young victims, a place for them to feel at peace, go to school, and readjust to the world they were taken from. Because once victims are rescued, it doesn't mean their nightmare is over.
It was scary. Anybody that I felt was a pimp after I got out of it, I kind of went into like a panic attack, and I felt like it was going to happen again.
Making the state's first home for victims a defining moment for South Carolina.
If you don't have a placement, some place that this child can go to receive the services and the help that she needs, you really don't have a strong state.
Which brings the question of how is this happening and what's being done to stop it? For those questions, I came to Columbia to sit down with our state attorney general.
In 2011, when I took office, there was so much we didn't know about the problem of human trafficking in South Carolina. At that time, we were one of the worst states in the country on our enforcement of human trafficking in South Carolina, and now we're one of the best states in the country.
Looking at the data, our state has a C rating from Shared Hope International, a national nonprofit that works in all states to end sex trafficking. And that score has only gone down from the year before. But in sitting down with the Attorney General, he's right about how much our state has moved forward. When he was elected, our state was amongst the worst in the country. But still, why the step backwards?
Under a federal statute, it's mandated that the definition of child abuse and neglect and sexual assault has to include sex trafficking as well. And our state definition is behind, and we don't have that yet.
Brooke Burris is on the task force, and she says this is the biggest reason why our state was set back when it comes to the grade. The South Carolina Attorney General's office is working to fight sex trafficking in the state. I checked out their annual report to see what the plan is moving forward to make sure this comes to an end. What I learned may shock you.
As much as I love Charleston, and I would love to live there, it's scary for me to live there.
Charleston County is the #2 place in the state for human trafficking. Beth can attest to that because she was brought here for that very reason.
I mean, a lot of tourists come through, you know, they want a good time while they're there.
So how will we see the change? The Attorney General's office wants to train those most likely to come in contact with victims, medical professionals, truck drivers, and law enforcement. They also want to train lawyers who might later represent the victims.
So we'll train lawyers to say this is what trafficking might look like in our state.
The plan calls for a deeper look at the laws we have when it comes to trafficking and to open the first shelter for victims, which could happen any day now, which could change their lives and speed up healing. But what's a crucial part of our state's plan is making you aware that this is happening.
It's every day. It's every minute of every day. It doesn't stop. They don't sleep.
Beth was taken to countless cities along the East Coast. Charleston would be the last city she would be taken as a victim of sex trafficking.
That's how this nightmare ends, at this same spot on a cold winter night 5 years ago, her arrest being her salvation.
They apparently had been following us for a long time. Homeland Security was. And they finally raided us while we were in Charleston. At first I was upset, but after a day or two in jail, I was relieved. I was safe.
Jail became her new life, a safe haven from what she was rescued from.
I literally cried and begged them not to let me go because I didn't know if the girls were downstairs waiting for me to come out. I didn't want to go back into that life.
Years later, she has her GED, starting to go back to school, and she's building a better life. Things are getting better for her and for our state. But she is still picking up the pieces.
It's calm. It's very quiet. I don't go out. I don't party. I work. I take care of my son, and I go home.
How has he changed your life?
He gave me life. I didn't have life. I didn't want to live anymore, and I got pregnant with him, and he really saved my life.
Yet she can't show her face because years later, she still lives in fear. Fear for a world and memories of an abductor that will never truly leave her.
To me, I worry that he'll get out and look for me. I don't want him to find me at all. I don't want him to know anything about me.
She was forced to do more and see more in that year that you and I will never know or fully understand. But she wants to leave you with this.
My biggest thing is I want girls to know it's real, because I never believed pimps really exist, but they do, and it's not good.
The story doesn't end here. There's something you can be doing to look for this happening in your community. Up right now on live5news.com, I have information on what you can be looking for and how you can get involved in stopping sex trafficking.